The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
Hey parents, Greenlight is here to take one big thing off your to-do list, teaching your kids about money. With a Greenlight debit card and money app of their own, kids and teens learn to earn, save, and invest. You can send money instantly, set flexible controls, and get real-time notifications of your kids' money activity. Set up chores and put allowance on autopilot to reward them for their hard work. Then learn about the world of money together. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Walk the dogs, school drop-off, meetings from 10 to 3, take kids to soccer, then no time left for a jog.
When everyone else is relying on you, it's easy to put your needs last. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online, so you can show up for yourself the way you do for others. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
It's been a little while since I penned you an ode, but a World Cup completed calls for poetic mode. It's been a spectacular month of footballing drama, of narrative and story, of chaos and karma. But before we get on to the action on show, a word on what we said just 4 weeks ago, that we wouldn't forget what this World Cup has cost, the morality questions, the lives that were lost, and to all those who suffer under stifling regimes, let it ring that football should always support your dreams. I've said it before, but there's never a bad time to say no freedom till we're equal. And that's the bottom line. On field, we've witnessed remarkable scenes from 32 of the world's best national teams. We started with shocks, and the Saudis led the way, beating Argentina on their opening day. Their unbeaten run shattered, quick snap, although they'd have their say, and we'll get to that. Japan put Germany in the mud not long after, and Hansi Flick's campaign turned into a disaster, as the Samurai Blue then put Spain to the sword, topping the group, making everyone applaud. But the greatest run of all, everyone's favourite story, was Morocco's underdog surge of such glory, left Belgium in their wake, Spain and Portugal too, as the Atlas Lions roared onwards and through. Semi-finalists backed by a relentless crowd, a run to make Africa and the Arab world proud. It all came down to 2 though, when all was said and done, a final of giants in the hot desert sun. France, Argentina, Messi versus Mbappe. Only one PSG star could leave Qatar happy. And what a show they put on, a final to behold as 2 colossuses tussled for that trophy of gold. A hat-trick for the young gun wasn't quite enough, and we learned this Argentina are made of sterner stuff. Spot kicks in the final, 12 yards of turf, 8 kick takers in the greatest show on earth. Dibu came up big once again from the spot as Argentina sliced through their mental Gordian knot. Champions of the world once again, they would sing, and we got a crowning moment for football's beloved king, Lionel Messi, the greatest of all time, lifting that Jules Rimet trophy to the sky. The last piece of the puzzle muzzle, a career without compare, and a closing glory before passing it on to his heir. Tears flowed, and nation rejoiced as one throughout the night. World Cup 2022. Albi Celeste delights. Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your World Cup wrap-up show. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Beautiful, beautiful words, mate. Loved it. I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. You know, it's the day after the World Cup. It feels a bit day after the Lord Mayor's show, doesn't it? Are
you wearing a Scotland shirt?
No, it's just a football shirt.
It looks like you're wearing a Scotland shirt from here. And I'm like, this is not the way to end a World Cup, Jack.
No, it's just a football shirt. But I am in blue and white. To be fair, I've been in blue and white for a fair amount of time over the last weekend. But it's been a remarkable tournament, Dean. Just, you know, a stunning footballing display, I think, across. And there have been calls that, you know, maybe this was one of the greatest World Cups we've ever witnessed.
Yeah, it was. I mean, coming into it, I remember a lot of my friends saying they weren't excited about it. And I was like, well, you should be. You should be, because the players we've got going into this tournament, some of the team setups we've got, some of the games we definitely know that we're in for, given that the groups, the way they're lining up, this is going to be brilliant. And yes, it's weird because it's at Christmas time. It's cold outside. There are serious human rights problems going on around this tournament. That is all absolutely, like, we can have that discussion. But let's talk about football. You all should be excited because it's going to be amazing. And it probably exceeded expectations, really. And certainly everyone I know was watching it throughout. Yeah, I mean, apart from missing a few of those early 10 a.m. games, I don't think I missed any. Can't think of any. Certainly not missed the knockout stage. I certainly know you didn't. But I think that is just the general case, like around the world. Like if you were able to watch a game, you just ended up watching them because there was so much drama, and it couldn't have ended any better. It really couldn't. Like, Qatar have had it off. They've absolutely had it off. They cannot believe that it's gone this well. It's gone so well. They'll probably have the World Cup again in about 12 years because it was so, people are just going to want this again. Like, from a footballing perspective, it's unbeatable.
I think this is it. And there are questions. And, you know, obviously when you have World Cups, there's a lot of talk usually about the amount of travel that teams have to do, right? That wasn't a factor in this World Cup. And there's also the kind of element of a Winter World Cup has thrown up loads of its own problems. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just, you know, observationally, I think it's worth kind of discussing the idea that players have come into this. Yes, obviously we've had some major injuries, which have been really upsetting to see players ruled out. But also the players that have come into it who have, you know, started the season well, were able maybe to carry that form into the tournament a little bit more because there's no breather between that. They've come in kind of in club mode, okay, we're completely ready, rather than at the end of a season. And there's maybe something to be said for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's very weird. I mean, we've got like Carabao Cup this week and Liverpool playing Man City. I mean, it's an absolute... It seems farcical, really. We're halfway through a season here. Come on, lads, get back into shape. Here we go. Never mind what you've been up to over there. But yeah, I think it probably is part of the reason that we saw a rise in levels in some sense was because everyone was in proper game mode already. There was no, you know, end of season niggles. There was no tiredness. I mean, there was tiredness in the end. Just look at Raphael Varane, but that's because he'd put his heart and soul into absolutely every minute for France throughout the World Cup. But yeah, I think there was a lot to be said for that. I don't ever want to see it again. It's fine as a one-off. I can accept it. And, you know, not everything's going to be the way we know it for the rest of our lives, and things will change. But you adapt to it, and that's part of football now. Football's changing year on year on year, and it's becoming a game that really we don't recognise from when we all first started watching it years back. But you've got to adapt, and you've got to grow, and you've got to go with it, because otherwise it just leaves you behind. And the world's changing. It is a World Cup, and Qatar is in the world, and we've now given people an opportunity to have a slice of this greatest football tournament you'll ever watch, that they would never have had the opportunity to watch it. And the nations that were filling the stadiums are typically not the nations that would normally fill all the stadiums, and some of the countries that would have been there couldn't get there as much. And it's frustrating for them, but that's part of it, I'm afraid. Like, you can't always be exactly where you want to be. So I think that did actually even things out a little bit at times.
What I really want to see is a North African World Cup now. That's all I'm really after. After seeing, the Tunisia fans, the Morocco fans, I would like to see a North African World Cup in the next sort of 10, 20
Yeah, well,
years.
hopefully this has given it a better chance of happening. As long as they can prove the organisational side of things, I'm sure they'll have a good chance of doing it, because Qatar, for all of the faults that there have been, they have pulled off a perfect tournament in terms of actually letting it run, and the stadiums and stuff. There was certainly gaps in the stands at some points, and people's.
I think people forget that that's not that uncommon.
That's not uncommon, yeah. That's the thing.
Obviously, there are places in the world, and I imagine we'll have these conversations again in 4 years' time, where stadiums will be filled to capacity for every single game. But I don't think that that's the kind of thing you see at every single tournament, and that's a shame. I'm not suggesting that that's a good thing, but I don't think it's. I think it was maybe highlighted more than perhaps it has been in other places. But also, we talk about a Winter World Cup. It's high at summer in the Southern Hemisphere.
Exactly. This is it. Because
I did
for
make
us,
this
it's
point.
winter.
Exactly. The fact is, you saw the scenes in Buenos Aires and the rest, but those scenes are middle of summer. Everyone out on the streets enjoying, the victory celebrations in the height of summer. And I think that's an incredible thing. We saw similar scenes. Obviously, the time difference in Australia wasn't great in terms of the games happening in the middle of the night, but you'd imagine similar things if, we're seeing a World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. We've got a World Cup in Australia and New Zealand next summer. Obviously, the Women's World Cup takes place next summer there. And it's going to be interesting to see those kind of differing time zones affecting the rest of the world in the way that the Australian people have, I'm sure, had to get up at 3 a.m. this tournament, sure, but, at late night games in other tournaments as well. And I think all of those things play a factor. And I think it's important to remember that the world is a large and diverse place, and we should be trying to encourage football in pretty much every single aspect of that world. And I think we've seen some differences than perhaps the traditional World Cup would say. But I think off the back of that, and look, we'll talk at the end about what it means for the next World Cup, which will be 48 teams, and whether there is a kind of move away from European dominance and what it all means in the grander scheme of things. But I think when you're looking at it, you have to try and consider it from all these different angles, and there have been plenty of different angles to look at across this World Cup. I think we should talk about the final before we go on to kind of our complete review. We obviously recorded a podcast on Patreon yesterday, straight after the final. It was quite an emotional podcast. There was a lot going on in it. I was very emotional across the course of yesterday. Yeah, absolutely, 100%, bawling my eyes out for the majority of yesterday, and that was during the game. Never mind after it. So yeah, exactly. So we get into this, but it was maybe the final to end all finals, and there have been people saying that it's the greatest game of football they've ever seen. I think that there's a case to be made.
Yeah, I mean, like you said on Patreon, it wasn't until the 70th minute. Certainly, it was a good game, and if you're Argentinian, it was going perfectly. But basically, Otamendi is to thank for gifting us the greatest game we've ever seen, because that unnecessary foul has literally changed the dynamic of the game and given us something that I didn't know we were worthy of. I didn't know football could be this topsy-turvy, this harrowing at this level. It shouldn't be. It should be much more controlled. It's these players should be too good to allow a game like this to unfold. But there was too much emotion on the line. There was too much at stake. And Argentina couldn't let Messi not have his moment, but France couldn't let him have it. They couldn't let grip of that trophy. And that's when the battle commenced. Once it went to 2-1, once Otamendi had messed up and Mbappe had said, thank you very much, we'll take it from here. And then he smashes home that equaliser, one of the best World Cup final goals you'll see. It changes everything. And oh my God, I can still feel it. The feeling, I didn't even care particularly who won the game, but there was a feeling I got in my gut when that goal went in, just thinking, oh my God, I felt for every Argentinian like they'd just been punched in the stomach and said, take that. He's not getting the trophy that easily, because that's how it felt. It felt like Messi was walking his way to the World Cup after all this time, this long journey. He was just going to meander up there and pick up the trophy and wander off. But he had to work for it, didn't he? And that's what made it all the more special. I'm sure, actually, when he looks back on his career, maybe already he's thinking this, but like, it was perfect that it had to come around with such drama and anguish.
Yeah, 100%. And we talked about this yesterday, but there is still this thing that I kind of have in my mind, which is you watch a film sometimes and the main character doesn't go through any trauma, or it doesn't go through any sort of negative emotion. You get to the end of it. I actually was about this about like The Greatest Showman. I don't think the actual trauma in the middle of it is particularly strong enough to make you be like, oh, I need to dive back into this. And actually, it's probably a fitting comparison talking about Showman in this final, but it did almost feel too easy. It was like, they can't win it like this. Argentina is a nation with such, a rich history, a rich footballing history, but a rich cultural history as well, which is based in, overcoming odds, overcoming obstacles. And we've seen this happen in various manners down the years, especially on the football pitch. And that kind of, the game, obviously, the Maradona hand of God game is the one that's always referenced, in that there's one goal which is obviously shouldn't stand, and the other goal is maybe the greatest goal that's ever been scored on a football pitch. And that's the kind of duality of Argentina in so many ways. One of the goals is a little bit naughty, and the other one is absolutely like awe-defining. It's those kind of moments and that kind of two sides of the coin that make this special. And actually that's what we got in the end. And I'm completely with you. I think if it had ended 2-0 and France hadn't ever got going, it would have felt a bit like, oh, where was the flip? Where was the turn? You can't pull off a magic trick if you don't get the moment where you think that something's going to change. You don't get the third act of the play. And I think Sid Lowe wrote in The Guardian today, it felt like Argentina had to win it 3 times. And actually, genuinely, I think that's quite a nice moment. It felt like they'd won it. It was taken away from them. It felt like they won it again in extra time. It's taken away from them. And then they win it on penalties. And all of that wrapped in together, the emotion and the chaos of it all, I think turned this into one of the greatest games of football that I've ever watched.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, it was exactly that. It's funny, like, because you come into it and you're like, well, this isn't a proper World Cup. This is not what it's about. And you write that, you're like, that's a proper World Cup. That's a proper final. So, like, again, like on the football front, it really couldn't have been any better. And like to end it like this, and for Messi to take it in his stride and just not let it all get to him at all, which was so impressive in itself. And even like the third goal to fall to him, for him to be the guy that's there following it up and to push it over the line and then score his penalty, it's just all so impressive. And on the flip, you've got this Mbappe monster, the guy that's about to eat up football. Him and Haaland are here, but Haaland's at Norway, so he can't do a lot about this. He might be able to in the next World Cup. Well, I'll get to that later, because he might actually make it to the next World Cup. You never know. But in terms of being a monster, a football monster, like a Messi, Mbappe is going to do it, right? We are seeing the beginnings here. And I say the beginnings, even though this is already his second World Cup final.
We're 5-6 years into the story. We're still at the beginning of it, which is the terrifying thing.
We've got another 10 years.
He's equaled Pele's record. He's 23.
Yeah, we've got another 10 years of him at least, this sort of level. Hopefully, if he can stay clear of injuries. And look, I was annoyed at Mbappe when they homed in on him after Kane's penalty miss, and he's laughing. But that's just because you take things personally in that moment. And I was like, I don't want France to win this. And actually, as it turned out, I didn't want France to win it. Start of that game yesterday, I thought, I don't care who wins. Like, yeah, it's a good story if Messi does, but I don't actually care. I just want it to be a good game. I tell you what, halfway through that game, I was like, France better not win this game, because they do not deserve it. And as it went on and on, I was like, they got to 2-1. I was like, no, because although it was like turning and turning, if they'd have ended up winning that game, it was unjust. It would be deserved in a different way.
To overcome a 2-goal deficit with 20 minutes left in a final would have been a stunning tale in its own right?
And to have got through the tournament with pretty much that mentality too, because there was never a game where I watched the entire thing and was like, this is fascinating. I can't believe how they're evolving football here. There was none of that really. Like, there was moments of it, and Mbappe provided most of them, and Griezmann too, played his role. But yeah, ultimately it would have just felt wrong if France had actually won that game. So I'm glad it came to the ending that it did. And when you see back in Argentina, the scenes that unfolded, the people in the streets, the flags that are hanging from monuments, from buildings, when you hear people talking about the fact that, like, we don't have much to gloat about here, we don't have much to be happy about here, but we've got a football team we're proud of, and that they give us something to fight for and live for, and they start talking in these terms, and you're like, wow, like, this is what it's about. This is what the World Cup is about. It is about giving people a moment in their lives that they cherish and they cling on to, and they remember with fondness for years, and that brings them together. And for that, I'm just so happy that it happened like this.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you're absolutely right. And this is it. It came to that moment, and for me, I think maybe the biggest thing that not goes unspoken, because it's been talked about a little bit, but Lionel Messi, I think, is widely considered as the greatest player of all time around the world, apart from in Argentina. and obviously in Brazil, but and Portugal. But we get generally, I think the kind of widespread consensus is that Lionel Messi is probably the greatest footballer to have ever played the game. Mm-hmm. And in Argentina, it's like, no, Maradona. Like, Maradona's the greatest. He led us to World Cup triumph. And for me, that kind of moment of catharsis where you're going, in his homeland, the one place, there's obviously these interviews with Messi as a kid being like, I want to play for Argentina and I want to win the World Cup. And that's kind of the outset moment. And then suddenly you're like, wow, he's done it. But also for him to be elevated into that pantheon of his nation's heart, on equal standing with Maradona is amazing. I think it's beautiful to watch a player finally hit that moment where, we got it a bit at the Copa America last year, sure. But to go and win the World Cup and put himself alongside Maradona in his country's heart is just this kind of secondary subplot that I thought was absolutely beautiful. And for him to do it in this kind of manner, in a manner that Maradona would have absolutely loved, right? The chaos of that game would have been like, this is madness. I'm enjoying this a lot from the heavens.
Was it the last World Cup where he was sat there with a cigar and stuff? Was that the World Cup?
So, and also for it to be the first one after Diego's death, obviously important as well. So yeah, I thought that was a nice secondary point, and we'll come on to it, but it was lovely. But we should probably park our discussion of the final there and move on to wrapping up the rest of the World Cup, where we'll be starting with our team of the tournament and some other categories as well after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Gotta walk the dogs, school drop-off, meetings from 10 to 3, take kids to soccer practice, then there goes the extra time for a jog. That's okay. Maybe next week.
When everyone else relies on you, it's easy to put your needs last. Therapy is a dedicated time to focus on what you need to be happy, so you can show up for yourself the way you do for others. BetterHelp offers convenient online therapy on your schedule. It's the same professional service you'd get from an in-person therapist, but with the option to communicate when and how you want, by chat, phone, or video call. Go to their site and fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.
Welcome back to Ranks FC. We're talking the World Cup that was. We've just seen Argentina lift their third World Cup trophy. It's time for us to pick our team of the tournament. Dane, do you want to go first, or do you want me to lead us off?
No, you lead us off, mate. And then what I think I'll do, because you're such a voice of reason on this World Cup, I think you lead off with the team of the tournament, which should be bang on, and then I'll correct it afterwards, or just suggest some names for
some alternatives.
Some alternatives for spots that I feel deserve more competition.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I've gone with Dominik Livakovic in goal from Croatia.
Oh, that's wrong. So
yeah, so that's a shame. We'll start that one off. I've actually gone for 3 Croatia players in my team of the tournament, Juranovic and Gvardiol as well in this back line. I've put in Harry Suter because I really like him, frankly, of Australia, and I thought he had a monstrous tournament. Teo Hernandez at left back, where I think maybe the weakest spot in the entire team. I didn't think any left backs completely and utterly covered themselves in glory in this tournament. In midfield, I've gone for Sofiane Amrabat of Morocco, Enzo Fernandez of Argentina, and Antoine Griezmann, and the front three of Messi, Alvarez, and Mbappe.
Interesting. Well, in goal, like I did joke a little bit there about. I do think that I would give it Emi Martinez because of two key reasons. One, his performance in that shootout, which was unbelievable, and then in the final, the save, like that save was just defining. I mean, he's going to have that photo is going to be in his lounge without doubt, right? Like Kolomuani. Look, people saying he shouldn't have hit it like that. He could have taken it in a different way. He could have chipped it over him. He could have taken it past him.
You're not chipping the keeper in the last minute of the tournament. You've come on. It's like you're under your 10th. I think it's like his 5th cap for France. He is absolutely not going to try and chip the keeper in the 120th minute of a World Cup final. He's done everything right. He's kept it low. He's hit it hard. Yeah, it's just an absolutely outrageous save.
He's spread himself so well, Martinez. It's just a brilliant save. So that, on top of the penalty saves, he had a good tournament anyway. Plus the way he celebrated getting the Golden Glove. I think Emi Martinez deserves it.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fair enough.
So in terms of who you've got in the defence, so just recap who you said again.
Juranovic, Gvardiol, Sutar and Teo Hernandez.
Yeah, okay, so I had most of those. Teo Hernandez, I don't like either. I don't believe that he was the best left. I can't believe that he was the best left back at this tournament. I can't think.
Well, I don't have an alternative.
Estupinan, Ecuador. I've seen a couple of people tried to throw him into the mix.
Yeah, but he also went out in the group stages.
He wasn't there very long, was he? And he didn't do very well. So it's hard to argue. But Teo wasn't that consistently good in my eyes. Like
Jordi Alba might be a shout. Jordi Alba did really well, but then they obviously got knocked out in the round of 16s. And then obviously Morocco alternated left backs because Mazraoui was carrying a bit of an injury, so we saw a lot of Atiat Allah, who I thought was excellent, but I just don't think he played enough minutes to justify putting him in here.
Yeah, and in terms of Harry Suter, he did have a good tournament, but I don't think he would genuinely make the team in the tournament. I think you could include any Moroccan.
Roman Saiss is potentially unfortunate.
Roman Saiss is probably the one I would choose. If you're going to give Harry Suter that much respect, you should give Harry Maguire similar respect because he had a redeeming tournament. And if you want to pick a performance that can put you back into the mix, then Upamecano, for what he produced for France.
I thought he was just very good apart from in the game against England. It was one of those, generally throughout the tournament, I think he's been excellent. He just had an absolute shocker in one of the games. And therefore, the next game, obviously, he missed out on because he had a virus. So,
yeah, I think to bounce back from having a shocker against England, missing the next game, but then playing like that.
Rafa Varane probably has a point to say here, but so should Otamendi, who I thought was excellent throughout.
It's a really hard choice in the defence, I think. Yeah. But midfield, I think you've probably got it spot on. I think Amrabat, Enzo Fernandez and Griezmann is hard to argue. I think you might be able to throw McAllister into the mix, but he probably doesn't nudge any of those three out of there.
I've seen some people put Bellingham in, who obviously had a very, very good tournament, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can shift Enzo Fernandez in there really. So I think
he just won the World Cup. This is the thing. If England had made it to the final, then sure, Bellingham probably would have figured here, but he didn't. They were gone in the quarters and. That was that. So the front three takes care of itself, doesn't it?
I'm sure you could probably argue for Olivier Giroud instead of Alvarez, but considering he got pulled up before half time in the final,
it's
not a great finish, is it?
Isn't it? He did well. That's why I always believe in Olivier Giroud. That's why I backed him to be the Golden Boot winner. But he got 4 goals in the end in the tournament. It's half the amount that Mbappe ends up getting. Messi gets 7. Was Alvarez end on 4 or 5?
4, yeah.
But Alvarez, he's so young. He's got so much to come. Excited to see him now back in the Premier League because he won't be willing to rest and just settle back on the bench now. He'll want more and more minutes, I imagine. So it'll be interesting to see how Pep handles that straight away because he already knew he had a gem. You've talked about Alvarez for a long time on this podcast and what he's going to be, and now we're all seeing it because of this platform that he's given himself. Yeah, so I think that's a really good team.
Good, excellent. Well, we worked our way through it. Who thought the centre back would be the hardest position to pick in your team of the tournament?
And Harry Souttar would get the nod.
Harry Souttar still getting the nod. What a man! What a man! Stoke City with an absolute gem there. Let's move on let's do our golden ball ranking then, and we'll come back round for best moments and biggest shocks afterwards in part 3, perhaps. But I have it down as Amrabat in 3, Mbappe in 2, and Messi in 1. And I don't know if there's much argument to be had there.
No. Tough.
It's annoying because I thought Antoine Griezmann was pretty much nailed on. And then again, just kind of went a little bit missing in the final.
The final defines these things, doesn't it? So he wasn't going to be in the running in the end, just didn't quite do enough. He had a brilliant tournament, no doubt. I mean, Enzo Fernandez obviously got the Young Player Award, had as good a tournament as Sofiane Amrabat, no doubt about it. Probably better. But ultimately, Amrabat was superb, like absolutely superb. I couldn't believe that Morocco managed to get a team out for the third, fourth playoff, as strong as they did, particularly. So we'll see how that ends up. I mean, Amrabat now on the radar of a lot of big clubs on the back of the levels he was able to lift himself to.
He already plays for a big club. What are you on about?
Yeah, he plays for a reasonably big club. Now he's going to go to a really big club from Fiorentina.
It's a tradition now for the Amrabat family to turn up and absolutely nail a World Cup, because his brother Nordin was absolutely sensational at the last World Cup, if you remember.
Yeah, I do remember. That's a good point. But yeah, Mbappe and Messi. Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got to give it to Messi in the end. But did Mbappe have a better tournament than Messi?
I don't think in terms of, I thought obviously Mbappe is one of those moments players, and Messi is as well to a point, obviously, at this point in his career. But there were games, and the final is such a good example of this, I think, where you're looking at Kylian Mbappe and you're going, for the first 7 minutes, like, what are you doing? And then suddenly you're like, oh, he's got a hat trick. That's just come out of nowhere. And I think we saw that generally kind of, in various ways throughout the tournament. I think in the Poland game, it was one of those where he's obviously scored 2 absolutely sensational goals and didn't do much else. And you're like, oh, he's come on and made things happen. And he had a couple of moments in the England game, but weren't the ones that defined the way that the game played out in many ways. I think Lionel Messi's had a tournament in which he's showcased different elements of his ability in each game. Obviously the ability, you look through Argentina's fixtures and you go, right, okay, obviously the first one was a bad game. You get to the Mexico game and that ability to make things happen, to spark everyone into life with a piece of magic from outside the box. I think in the Poland game, he completely and utterly controlled it in the way that he moved around and dropped a bit deeper and played those passes in. Obviously, a wonderful assist. And you go on to the rest of the tournament. You get the game against Australia where he scores the opener, and there's that bit of fire after that flare up with Bajic on the sideline, and he suddenly takes it onto his own hands and goes, no, I'm not having that. That's absolutely not happening. You move into the quarterfinal against the Netherlands. And not only, obviously, does he produce the moments of magic, but also, I think, stepped up and led his team emotionally when they really needed it. And I think you could say similar for the game against France. And in the Croatia game, he, that ability to just absolutely twist defenders in knots was showcased in those moments against Guardiola, who's just made our team of the tournament. Yeah. So I think that's why, for me, I think generally you look at this tournament and go, this has been his tournament, not just for winning it, but actually just the way he performed throughout was pretty remarkable. But I'm with you in that, obviously, there's a major contender in Kylian Mbappe who's gone and won the Golden Boot. So if France had won this tournament, would we be flipping these over? The answer is probably yes. There is a little bit of outcome bias.
Yeah, I mean, if you score a hat trick in the World Cup final and you've already got 5 goals under your belt before that point, like, it's hard to imagine that not being the case, that you would get the player of the tournament too. It'll be intriguing really to see what happens to Mbappe over the course of, how many more World Cups would he have in him? 3 probably, potentially. What
at least
kind
2,
of footballer? At least 2. Are we looking at someone here that ends up more like a Messi, or is he going to be more of a Ronaldo? I honestly don't know, because he's got both sides to him, hasn't he? He's got the beauty of like the Messi glide, and he has these moments.
That ability to slow a player down and then speed the play up again is
so that
vintage.
That technical trait, is of Mbappe is comparable to Messi's. Yet he's got the ego and the, I guess, nastiness.
Self-belief,
Might be the
I
wrong
think.
one. Yeah, he's got something of Ronaldo about him too. Maybe that's why he's already considered like the best player in the world by some at this point, because he has got the blend. But it'll be interesting to see which of those traits ends up becoming defining for him, because I'm not sure, and I think it's quite a dangerous step potentially in how it gets managed, because he's going to have a big transfer on his hands at some point. He's going to go somewhere, and we've seen the stories that come out of PSG about he wants to pick the team, he wants to decide who's coming in. You know, over time we'll find out how much of that is true to his character, how much of that is what he's like, and if that's what the stories you're hearing at 23, by the time he gets to be 35, like Messi, what's his career been like? How did it actually play out? That's what I'm fascinated by in the career of Mbappe. It's already been unbelievable, to be honest. He could retire tomorrow and that could be fine.
Yeah.
But there's so many more chapters to come, and I think some of them will be beautiful, but I also think some of them will be ugly, and it'll be really interesting to see how he's looked back on one day.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's obviously a load of players who shone. Some of them we've already mentioned. But I think there's a couple that maybe we could talk about here. Someone who's incredibly unlucky, I think, not to make the team of the tournament was Azzedine Ounahi, Morocco's number 8, who was absolutely exceptional. And I think it might be worth just talking about some of these players in terms of what comes next for them. Azzedine Ounahi obviously plays for Angers in France, who are sort of mid to lower in the league table in Liga. I had a good season last year, started really well and dropped off, but not a big club, and Liga has got its own financial difficulties that we've seen in this kind of post-COVID world. Obviously, there's Alexis McAllister, who plays for Brighton, who's going to be in incredibly high demand, you'd imagine. I think Josip Juranovic, who plays for Celtic, Dominik Livakovic, who plays back home in Croatia. And then there's your likes of Cody Gakpo, Frankie de Jong, who had an absolutely sensational tournament and is still in this sort of weird limbo at Barcelona. The likes of Mohamed Kudus, who was linked with a transfer in the summer from Ajax, who I thought was excellent, pretty much all of Ghana's games. Aysel Adouni, who plays for Ferencváros in Hungary. There's lots of players here who've made a bit of a case. But I think Ounahi, McAllister, Juranovic, Livakovic, and Gakpo, perhaps, could be very interesting to see what their next steps involve.
Yeah, I mean, Ounahi being linked pretty closely with Leicester is the main one. It seems like Angers are pretty intent on trying to keep him for this season, and they'll
after that performance.
Yeah, they'll strike a deal now, but they're like, "Come on, give us some of this." I've never seen him play for Angers. I don't know if he does do this week in, week out, but I think it would make sense for a club anyway to give him that time to get his head around what he's just managed, to accept the fact he's got a big transfer on his hands, and then spend a few months continuing his form at Angers. I think that'd probably be fine. Leicester seemed to be the first club really that were linked with this. It'll be interesting to see whether there are bigger clubs that get on their tails. Obviously, you hear Jose Mourinho talking about him in unbelievable terms, really, talking about him, one of the best midfielders at the tournament or whatever he said.
He's right.
Leeds, yeah, he is, yeah, of course. But when
he's
Mourinho
going to be trying to
it,
sign him for Portugal next.
Yeah,
that's where he's going.
And then you get like Leeds are linked with him. I'm just not like, if you were a Nahi, you're like, I don't even know what you are at the moment. I don't know what league you're going to be in a year. I can't sign for you, and then you're in the Championship.
You could probably argue the same for Leicester, really.
Possibly. I mean, it depends. I guess they could spell out under Brendan Rodgers and stuff. At least he's got a bit more of a legacy there, and they can spell things out and show him a Premier League trophy in the cabinet and stuff. But I would imagine there are going to be some other clubs coming to be involved in that one. Juranovic, again, being linked with quite a few clubs. I mean, he's obviously at Celtic, and they're signing a new right back.
Although I'm not sure if that Celtic completely see Johnston, who was actually a very good tournament himself for Canada. He was announced as a new Celtic player pretty much the day after Canada were knocked out of the tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know if they see him as a right back or as a centre back, because I think that there is kind of form for a player of his kind of profile moving into a back two or a centre back partnership, because he's very good on the ball.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Juranovic was first being linked to join Man United, and we were talking about a £5 to £10 million transfer as being talked about. It's now 25. It's now 25 though.
I just think it's one of those that Celtic just absolutely wouldn't have sold him for 5 to 10 million. Even pre-tournament, he's been really crucial to the way that Ange's team play. His ability, not only from open play, he's also an incredible penalty specialist. He's actually scored a fair amount of goals for Celtic from the spot. And he's very good going forward, as we've seen. I don't think Celtic would be accepting an offer in that range, because it makes no sense. There's no way you can replace him for that amount of money.
No, you're right. You can't. No, and if you are going to, then you sell him. Then you obviously make the most of a moment like this, and you hike up that price. Who else are we talking about? Livakovic. I don't know too much about where he could end up. Just flicking through where he's been linked. It's anywhere from Bayern Munich to Leicester at the moment. So
Leicester Leicester going on a World Cup shop window spree.
They're trying to fix a lot of stuff, so it might not be a bad idea.
He's a funny one, Livakovic. Obviously an incredible shot stopper, and very, very good penalty saver, and has got better with his feet over the time I've watched him. And been keeping an eye on him for a while. He's one of those kind of football manager legend players, because everybody signs him from Dinamo Zagreb, because he's one of the few goalkeepers available on the market at a reasonable price. He is a little bit iffy when it comes to claiming crosses, and so if you're going to go into a league where that's a big part of the game, it's something that I think teams need to be relatively aware of. Yeah, as we say, brilliant shot stopper, incredible reflexes. I don't think anyone saved more shots than Livakovic at the tournament, but I'd just be wary on that one, that people are going, we've seen a very small sample size of him here, and look, mine's not much bigger. I haven't seen them really aside from in European competitions, but it's just one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, while we're on Bayern Munich goalkeepers, by the way, let's bear in mind Manuel Neuer is out for the rest of the season after breaking his leg skiing. I'm pretty sure that as a footballer, the one thing you're not supposed to do is go skiing. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's like in your contract. Like, yeah.
I reckon Manuel Neuer writes his own Bayern contract, so he's probably just like, I like skiing, I'm going to allow that in my contract.
I mean, that is an embarrassing phone call he's had to make. Anyway,
Nagelsmann's going to be deeply unhappy.
I mean... yeah, you can't even, when you're that famous, you can't even pretend you did it like falling down the stairs. Somebody's going to have a picture somewhere of you like on the slopes. Right, the last two that you mentioned are Hakpo and Frenkie de Jong. Look, Frankie's back in the headlines being talked about for Man United again. I mean, I'm
so bored of this story.
bewildered by it as everyone else. I mean, reading between the lines, I mean, I haven't been in full-on transfer mode, but I have been, working on transfers for Give Me Sport throughout the World Cup still. So, the people that are writing about De Jong are Man United journalists, mainly, who are on the beat, who are basically saying United still have an interest in getting Frenkie de Jong to Man United. And then the Manchester Evening News have reported that Frenkie de Jong has told Erik ten Hag that he would be interested in joining Man United. And I'm like, hold on. This doesn't make any sense. Because Frenkie de Jong spent the whole of last summer saying he wasn't interested in that because he only wanted to play for Barcelona. And now he actually plays for Barcelona. He's back in the team. He regularly gets 90 minutes. I don't see in what world... I could believe Man United would still want to sign him. Fine. I just don't see how it's plausible right now. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway.
If they're going to sign a Dutchman, I would put my money on the other.
This is it. So Hakpo is the most likely to join Man United in this January window. I'm told that they're already quite involved in this, trying to figure out the ins and outs of it. I'd say probably expect them to try and get him for around £40 million. He's a player that they already had on their radar for some time. I think that one of the things actually that's really worked out for Erik ten Hag and has impressed people at Man United is the fact that Hakpo was one of the first names he put on their radar when he was coming into the club. They were asking the sorts of players he would want in. He said Hakpo was one of them, and now they're like, Okay, he's got a good eye. Like a lot of people seem to be talking about him. You know your stuff. We've got a good manager here. So they didn't get him. Obviously, I don't think Hakpo was completely deterred by Man United because the deal didn't happen and they ended up signing Anthony. There's still room to be made there at United because of Ronaldo's now gone. There's a spot in the squad, and I think because Hakpo can play centrally or wide, he is a good fit, and they will try to make that happen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm a big Cody Hakpo fan, as you know. I think he's a really, really good player, but I am wary that I still don't really see him as a centre forward. I still think his best games have come domestically, at the very least, from the left wing, which is a slightly interesting one considering, the players that Manchester United have there and the fact that Marcus Rashford has done a lot of his best work from those kind of areas. So I am a little bit iffy about this one. I actually do wonder if Cody Hakpo needs another stepping stone club before he goes to a top Premier League club, but we'll see. Maybe he sees Man United as that club, so it could be one of those. But it's going to be interesting because I just think that United are starting to sign, maybe a profile of player here who is very much not the centre forward that maybe people think he is after this World Cup. I think, and then obviously he's played in a front two here. It's a very different system to anything that United would be playing. I would just be wary a little bit of that transfer because I'm not completely and utterly convinced where he's going to fit in with the squad. So we'll see. But obviously a very talented player, and the more talented players you have, usually the better. So I can see why they're interested in that regard. Right then, after the break, we're going to be talking about our favourite moments and the biggest shocks in this World Cup in part 3. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ranks FC, part 3 of our World Cup wrap-up show. And it's time to talk about some of our favourite moments in a couple of different categories, Dean. I've put in this headline as kind of best moments excluding the final, because obviously we talked about that a lot at the top of the show. But I'm interested to what you make of these three. I've gone in order 3, 2, 1. At 3, I've gone for Vincent Aboubakar's last-minute winner against Brazil. And then the fact that he took his shirt off, got sent off, and was basically laughing with the referee as it happened really did tickle me. And I think that his kind of tournament that he's had has been incredible. And in so many ways, obviously he talks a massive game, Aboubakar, constantly. And what he's done in this tournament is just backed it up. And you've got to respect a man who's like, no, I'm actually better than Salah. And he scored one of the goals of the tournament. And then he scored the winner, the first ever African nation to beat Brazil at a World Cup, Cameroon, in that final game. Yes, it was a changed Brazil side, but it's still an incredible achievement. And to have that kind of sweet moment as the captain who wasn't started by his manager in the first game of this tournament. He's someone who's come into this side, take the armband back and be like, oh, no, I'm still the main man. And I just love the confidence he has. And then the fact that he backed it up on the pitch. He was like, he talked a massive game and then he walked the walk straight afterwards. And I was like, that is a man that I could get behind. So yeah, I absolutely loved Aboubakar's last-minute winner against Brazil.
Yeah. I had that on my list, so that's fine.
Good. At 2, I went for Gonzalo Ramos's hat-trick against Switzerland because this is incredible, right? And it was all about the narrative that surrounded it.
Yeah. I mean, it was obviously like, well, on the back of it, it was like, well, Ronaldo's leaving Man United. We just signed this guy because Ronaldo's been left out by Portugal and this guy's bagged a hat-trick. Gonzalo Ramos, like, literally became a household global name overnight. It doesn't happen very often in football anymore because people have usually got a very good awareness of you. Obviously, Ramos is a good player at Benfica, but he's not somebody that, your average football fan, I don't think, would have really heard of much before this moment. And it was such a good hat-trick. It was a proper hat-trick, and it was a huge moment that put him properly on the map. A shame, really, he didn't have much chance to gather momentum from it, as Portugal couldn't get into the latter stages that they would have hoped for. But there's no doubt, this guy will go on to huge things and always be brought back to this moment as the catalyst, if you like, it probably isn't. I'm sure that he's had a lot of other moments in his career that led to this one.
He scored a Champions League hat-trick. This man is nothing to be trifled with. And Benfica are absolutely storming the Primera, and he is literally the focal point. He's been very, very impressive this season.
We can forget all this, though, because we all saw him score a World Cup hat-trick against Switzerland, and that's what put him on the map.
Well, it was an incredible moment, incredible story, and the fact that his manager backed that and got the rewards he did in that manner, it was a real moment of clarity, I think, for a lot of people, and be like, wow, the next generation have arrived, and the old guard in some ways are starting to move on. Father Time remains in some ways undefeated, so that was in it too. At number one, I went for Achraf Hakimi's winning penalty against Spain. Now, obviously, this whole game was incredible, and the way that Morocco saw off this Spanish attack was tactically wonderful. I really enjoyed this. Probably my favourite 0-0 that I've watched in a long, long time. The way that it all played out. But Hakimi dropping the coolest panenka of all time, barely leaves the floor, and then doing the Sergio Ramos celebration to the Spain bench was just like unbelievable levels of narrative.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then, the celebrations that followed it too. Like everything about it was just top class. We all, I think, have seen enough of Hakimi by now. He's certainly more of a name in the game than Gonzalo Ramos at this point. And but I didn't know he was capable of this. I didn't know he was this cool. And now I do. Like, that was a big moment. I didn't have it at number one, though.
What did you go for? What was your favourite moment?
When Harry Kane made it 1-1 against France.
I thought you might. I wanted to give you the opportunity to bring this up.
Well, that was the most hope I'd had all tournament, because like nothing particularly great had happened up to that moment for England. And this is a bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously, as the best moment of the tournament. But England went behind against France in the quarterfinal, and we started playing differently, and we started to impose ourselves on France and on the tournament in that moment. And when Kane stepped up 10 minutes into the second half, scores his penalty past Hugo Lloris, it's England 1, France 1, and we're looking like the better team. And you're thinking, I just remember that feeling that you get, like when a big goal is scored for your club or your country. Like, it's just an unbelievable feeling. You got this hope, and that's all you can hope for, and especially in an international tournament. You just want that hope and that belief to be there. And it was there in that moment because he actually buried it. Okay, he didn't miss the pen. It didn't miss. Like, I can't believe it. We're in this game and we're looking good, and we've got game changers off the bench. We can do this. And it didn't happen. But it was for, I don't know, what minute did Giroud score? 78. So from 54 to 78. A great little 20 minutes
24 really good minutes.
It was a great little time. I was having a few of my mates in a little bar. We were having a lovely time imagining what might be happening. Where should we watch the semi-final Wednesday? Well, for the final, should we go to someone's house, or should we go to like... But that's what it's all about, right? You want to dream and you want to hope. And when Harry Kane scored that goal, it kind of gave me that feeling. And I was thinking, I was like, well, let's flip it to the US, because like...
I was going to say, Haji Wright's goal of the century.
Is it Haji Wright, or is it Timothy Ware against the Wales, the goal that gives them... That was their first game,
well,
wasn't
it might be the Pulisic goal against Iran, because obviously that's the one that actually sends the US through.
Whichever one it
but
was.
I do think Haji Wright scoring the weirdest goal of all time.
It was a very weird goal, and it did give him hope for a few minutes too.
Yeah, that was less time, but I did enjoy those moments.
But that's three quite big moments, to have a World Cup, and I think for the US, like it was important that they had moments and feelings to come away from this tournament feeling good about themselves and knowing that they're in a good spot with such a young squad. Yeah. Knowing that they're hosting next time around, and that like this is going to be a big opportunity. They're going to have a squad full of 27, 28-year-olds who hopefully have been on a good development path and continue to stay fit and in form. And that's all you can hope for. And I just think like, whichever of those goals was your favourite as a US fan, just keep hold of it and keep that memory and keep that feeling for when the next time arrives, because these moments well, they come across hopefully every 4 years, but in the US case, you can miss World Cup. So hopefully,
I've
you're
been
just getting
waiting
a taste
20
of more
years
to
for
come.
Ireland to get back to a World Cup. So, you can't take these
Were
things
you
for
even alive
granted.
20 years ago? So you've never seen Ireland?
I was very young, but I was in primary school, and I remember everyone got to watch. It was obviously the South Korea versus Japan tournament. So South Korea versus Japan. This the tournament held in South Korea and Japan.
Match to
They had a
decide
fight
who would
to
host
see who was going to host it, and everyone obviously was in primary school was wheeled out to the big hall for the England games, and me and my friend Mikey were like, no, we want to watch the Ireland game as well. So they had to put us in a little room, and they just brought in the TVs were on wheels, and you wheeled them in, and it was like, oh, you can watch Ireland play in the World Cup. So yeah, we got to watch it in a little music room with with a little TV, like two, three of us who demanded to be able to watch the Ireland game. So yeah, that was a moment. So I was alive, but I mean, yes, I haven't been able to do it in any sort of capacity as an adult. So, fingers crossed, 2026, here we come. We shall see. Right,
surely you'll make it.
I don't know, mate. We'll get on to that though. Let's finish with biggest shocks before we, go wrap up our final thoughts. In here, I've got Morocco's run to the semi-finals at 3. Now, this might seem very low, but I had Morocco making the quarterfinals, so I've only actually gone one better than I thought they would. And it was an incredible moment and an incredible run from Morocco that we've obviously talked about in some depth. But I just think that the whole thing felt like they were fueled by so much love and support within the stadium, but also just the way that Morocco was so fun at AFCON at the start of last year, have completely changed managers since then. Regragui came in, kind of reinstated Hakim Ziyech. He's wearing the captain's armband for the end of the semi-final and the third place playoff as well. I'm like, wow, this is some redemption arc for Hakim Ziyech in this squad. So there was loads about this Morocco run that I loved, but I have only put them at 3 in terms of biggest shocks because I did think they were going to do well in this World Cup, and they have proved me right. So that's nice. At number 2, I had Saudi Arabia beating Argentina on their opening day, which was just absolutely unbelievable. I think the most shocking thing about this was that Argentina should have been 3-0 up at half time, and they just somehow weren't. And then they got stunned and lost it. And look, we've talked a little bit before about the fact that we think that Argentina losing the opening game might have banded this group together and actually meant they were playing knockout football far before anyone else, and actually has probably fueled their eventual victory in this World Cup. But still, this result was absolutely shockwaves through the football world, wasn't it? It was catastrophic at the time for Argentina.
I mean, this Saudi Arabia, didn't they have a national holiday on the back of this? And for Argentina, I mean, from that point, they were one game away from going out of the tournament. They've gone on to win it. But after one game, they were on the cusp of going out. It was a disaster. And they hadn't played that badly the first half. They had a couple of offside calls against them. I can remember the game so clearly, watching it unfold. And I remember watching the first half and just thinking we were watching a 3 or 4-0 win. It was just going to be very routine.
We were watching a 3 or 4-0 win.
And it just changed in the second half. Saudi not only pulled the goals out the bag, but then pulled together quite literally as a unit and were like, we are not letting this moment go. We're going to do this and we're going to fight for this, and this we'll give it everything we've possibly got. And they got over the line. Absolutely remarkable story, and it looks all the better right now.
Yeah, definitely. And then at 1, I've just got the entirety of what happened in Group E, because it was just like chaos. I mean, the actual title here is Germany not getting out of the group, right? But from the moment where Japan scored that second goal in the Germany game, Asano with brilliant goal, but a very simple goal in so many ways. It was just like, oh, right. And then Spain wins 7-0 on the opening day. And you're like, wow, Japan have a really good chance of getting through here. All they need to do is beat Costa Rica. And you're like, oh, right, they've wrecked it. They've wrecked it. They've lost to Costa Rica. Now they've gone from beating Germany to they need to win against Spain to qualify. And then they beat Spain. It's like, and there's all this because, the whole point when Costa Rica pulled it back against Germany and, when they went ahead, you're like, what is going on in this group? Yeah. The entire group, the group of death, which it looked like to begin with, was chaos, but in no way that we were expecting. It was just one of those things where you couldn't take your eyes off any of this for a second. And I absolutely loved the whole of Group E.
Yeah, I mainly enjoyed Germany getting knocked out,
I knew
but
you were gonna say
absolutely,
that.
like that was definitely a highlight, and I'm glad it made number one. I'll tell you what, the one I'd throw into the mix is the shock of Croatia managing to beat Brazil. Not the fact that I guess that they were very, very unfancy to do that anyway, but when Neymar actually put Brazil 1-0 up in extra time,
The game looked dead. You're right.
that was it. Like they were like, oh, they've finally got the breakthrough. Like that's it. Neymar's managed to find that moment. They're through. And it wasn't the end. And Petkovic equalises with like 3 minutes left of extra time. And then obviously Croatia go on and win 4-2 on penalties. Neymar doesn't even get round to taking the penalty because he goes fifth. Very interesting, wasn't it? That of course last night Messi and Mbappe both go first. Like,
Well, I think at this point you're like, well, the narrative is going to be so bad if I don't take first. So you just have to do it now.
I think on the back of Neymar missing that, it's going to be a long time before like a star player doesn't get round to taking his penalty again. I know he's not the first person to do this.
Yeah, it happened to Cristiano, didn't it, at one point?
Yeah, it did happen to Ronaldo. But I just feel like this moment was so high profile, such a shock, that it scared people. And when they're going to get to pens now, they are going to make sure that like the best kickers are definitely taking one.
Yeah, clever kickers first, as we always say on ranks.
Exactly.
Good. Well, there we have it. There's pretty much all the World Cup ranked, if you will. But let's just talk about some closing thoughts, because this is the last 32 team World Cup, and what a way to go out. We are going to see some big changes when it comes around the 2026 World Cup in America, in Canada, and in Mexico. And not just in the fact that Qatar could fit into basically one state in America, and this is going to be a big, long, spread out tournament across time zones and different things. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of works. But also, with that in mind, it's going to be super interesting to see how this 48 team World Cup plays out, because I think there's going to be a lot of kickback against it, given how exciting this last 32 team World Cup was.
Yeah, well, I guess it's made a little bit easier by the fact we've got 3 host nations. So there you go. So that helps a little bit. So we're down to 45 that they're going to qualify. I don't like it at all. I'm not excited about it. I was talking earlier about trying to embrace change and like grow with the game. I don't think this is it. I mean, I don't know if they've 100% decided yet on the structure of the tournament, but there's been talks of like teams with groups with 3 teams.
Yeah, there's been, so this is just not set, right? There's been talk of, I thought it was groups of 3 and the top 2 go through in each, which would make sense. Yeah. And it would also mean that the games that teams play are the same, that you play the same amount of games basically, as long as you qualify. But then I saw some people saying it was still going to be groups of 4 and just like the 8 best third place teams would go through, which they did the Euros for a while, and I really don't like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, option 1 is the 3-team group, and then option 2 is 12 groups of 4. And then they're considering basically 2 methods, which is you feed into one knockout bracket, or you have 2 halves of 24 teams and you have 6 groups of 4. And then the halves come together for the final, something like that. It's all a bit ludicrous, and there's far too many teams involved here. I don't know what's going to. I don't know how much this is going to water down the World Cup. This is obviously the big concern. Is like, what's the quality going to be like? And I saw there was a test draw that somebody did. It's ESPN, I think. And they listed out some groups, like what it might look like. And you'd get like Group A, Canada, Wales, Algeria. Group B, France, South Korea, Nigeria. Group C, USA, Serbia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then you get like, England will get Group I, Colombia and Jamaica. And like, it's not terrible. Like, it's not that far off what you end up with anyway. And the day, like, you've still got to have the best teams get towards the end of the tournament. I don't know. I just feel it might be unnecessary. Is it about money? What's it about here? I don't know.
Well, we talked to the top, right? And so I also am a bit wary of the format. I am, but I do do like the fact that it's spreading it further. Europe are only picking up 3 extra nations. It's going from 13 to 16. We're seeing the fact that we've seen 5 African nations at this World Cup, and I think each of them have brought something different to the table. That's going up to 9.5, maybe 10. Obviously, the halves are weird. You have to play through different things. But, I think that increase is massive. They're getting basically like a 85% increase in their teams. We're seeing something similar in CONCACAF, 90% increase going from 3.5 to 6.5. We're getting increases. The OFC gets a guaranteed spot, which is really cool, and helps to expand football in nations which maybe have struggled to qualify at times because of the way that the qualification campaign works. I've said for a long time, although I'm sure there'll be plenty from CONMEBOL who disagree with me, that the African way of qualifying or the CF qualifiers are the maddest thing in football. The fact that it's just 10 groups and the winners just play each other in an unseeded draw, it's absolutely nuts to be looking at that. And so I think that increasing those numbers for CAF, for CONCACAF, for AFC is a really, really important thing, and I like it a lot. I'm just wary of the way that the format works.
Yeah, I mean, on that basis, I mean, they're obviously talking about having penalty shootouts in the group stages because of fears
they don't do that
over collusion. I'm just trying to find the best way to spell this out. So the report that I've just managed to get up quickly here. Fears over the 3-team groups include the possibility of collusion between 2 teams who would already know the final points total of the third team, something which can't happen when the final round of games in 4-team groups are played simultaneously. However, if FIFA go ahead with 3-team groups, they are considering the use of penalty shootouts toward a bonus point to participants so that cannot happen.
Yeah.
I don't know, mate. I mean,
I hope they don't do that, but I do agree that
And by the way, the penalties they're talking about happening before the game.
I did see this
before the game.
Well, this changed in 1986, right? The fact that they had to play the game simultaneously at the end of the group stage, because there was this game between West Germany and Austria in 1978, I think, where basically it was like, if the 2 teams draw, if West Germany and Austria drew, then they went. It was fine, and they basically just knocked the ball aimlessly around for 80 minutes.
The funniest thing, though, when you watch it,
it's absolutely incredible.
So
If you can find it, watch it. It's genuinely unbelievable. Yes, it's
82.
82.
They are just not going near each other, and then they're like accidentally kicking the ball off. They're like, it's pathetic, but it's so funny. I want to see that. I'd rather see that than penalties.
It's just like, oh right, cool, no worries. So yeah, it was really, really strange. But it's gonna be interesting to see how
whatever.
they
It'll still
out.
be exciting. This is the thing. We sort of if they're going to change it, we've got to embrace it because it's going to happen, and the game is going to change, and people are going to look to make it different, more exciting, whatever it might be. And it makes sense that in America, of all places, that they're going to want to add, for your average American, a bit more excitement. I think actually, from what I can grasp on social media and stuff, and my friends that are in America, a lot of people have been gripped by this World Cup as a whole. I think this has really, really brought in new people to the sport. You wouldn't think it's possible at this stage, but it is. It makes me laugh. I saw somebody describing okay, so you find soccer boring because a game might be 1-1, but then you're watching NFL, but that's more interesting. So if in football, if we score a goal and we said, well, that's 7 goals instead of 1. Is that more exciting? That's basically what we're talking about. If you call you score.
If you call a score, the amount of points it is, right? I completely agree. Although, I mean, that's no matter that's the case where you have lots of things in different sports where goals or scores are worth different points. But
anyway, I think that mentality is changing, and I think that this World Cup is really, really significant for the US because I think the sport is just absolutely exploding at the moment. MLS is taking off big time. We know how big the Champions League is over there now, and how many people watch that. So this tournament, by the time we get there in 3.5 years, is massive. And you think back to, I remember World Cup 94 very, very vaguely, but I was looking back now at, I've seen people being interviewed at the tournament. They literally don't know anything about the game or the sport or the players. And I think that'll be different. I hope it will.
Yeah, I think it will too. I'm really looking forward to that World Cup being in the States. I think it's going to be an incredible thing.
Obviously, it's in Mexico and Canada as well. I keep having to remind myself. Don't be disrespectful to those countries.
No, not at all.
They love football.
I think this is it. Like Mexico, obviously, has hosted a World Cup before as well. Very famously, and I think Mexico is very much football country. Do you know what I mean? That's it's one of those where I'm like, it's great that Mexico are part of this because they are the maybe traditional footballing country in CONCACAF. But for Canada, I think it's massive. And we didn't talk about the Canadian team, but I think that they've done a lot of good work. And we were talking about moments, right? And we were talking about those 3 US goals. But I think the performance that Canada dropped against Belgium, and then that first goal against Croatia, where they went 1-0 up, those are the moments that live with people. And I think that's incredible, in that what it's doing and bringing people to the forefront, bringing football to the forefront in countries where it perhaps hasn't been the dominant sport for a long, long time. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend to you that I think it's going to become the dominant sport in Canada, but the growth of the game is massive. And it's something we've talked about throughout this podcast. And I think we're going to see that further and further over the next couple of years. And we're going to start to see, that growth continue on a really nice trajectory. So I think on that positive note, DJ, we're going to call things a day.
I've actually just got one more thing to say because I'm adding a new element to this podcast, I've decided, and it's called Shout Out of the Week. Now, basically, we want you guys to start giving us more ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever you listen to this. Basically, we want you to start giving us new ratings. We never really asked for this before, but it turns out we probably should have been because we'd have had more listeners and we'd got in front of more eyes and had more people listening to this podcast. So if you'd be kind enough to go and give us a rating and review, we would really, really appreciate it. And a lot of people from Patreon have started to do this in the last week. And basically every week I'm going to go on there and check the latest reviews and find a good one and give a shout out of the week to one of our listeners. So it's time for Shout Out of the Week. This week's Shout Out of the Week is Heisenberg's partner. He says he's called it the best football podcast. He's given us the 5 stars. And he says, here's a quick ranking of elite football podcasts. 1, Ranks FC. 2, nothing. 3, nothing. 4,
End
nothing.
of list.
5, nothing. Any league, any player, even international tournaments, they are simply the best. A great mixed match of personalities and great chemistry between them. Also, they are very active in their community, which I like a lot. And we like you, Heisenberg's partner, because you are the shout out of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My shout out of the week is I hope Sam Tighe gets better.
Sam hasn't been sacked, by the way. People are going to start wondering if there's been some sort of feud in the camp. Nope.
No, we haven't sacked Sam. He's just not very well, the poor soul. So he's recovering from a virus. So we're holding the fort in his place. But all that's left for me to do is to say thank you very much, Mr. Dean Jones, for joining me today on our World Cup wrap up.
Cheers, mate.
It's been a real pleasure, DJ. Thank you to me. I'm great. Thank you to everybody for listening. For Jack Collins, Name of Hearts. This has been Ranks FC. We will be back next week as domestic football returns to look ahead to the transfer window and talk a little bit about the Boxing Day football, especially in the Premier League. Thank you so much for listening as ever, and we will see you next week. Take it easy, gang. Peace.
Walk the dogs, school drop-off, meetings from 10 to 3, take kids to soccer, then no time left for a jog.
When everyone else is relying on you, it's easy to put your needs last. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online, so you can show up for yourself the way you do for others. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.
When it comes to teaching kids and teens about money, practice makes perfect. That's where Greenlight comes in. With a debit card and money app of their own, kids learn to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest. Parents send instant money transfers, create custom chores, and automate allowance, while kids track their spending, set savings goals, and practice money skills they can use today and for life. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.